Chapter 1. Jojo, why do they make beer with bubbles? Danny asked with innate curiosity, looking deep into the white foam of his Budweiser. Joseph peered up at the baseball game, which was playing on a TV in the upper left corner of the bar. Joe lifted up his beer, I don't know, taking a big drink down. Just drink it? I bought it for you. Jojo, Yanks are doing good so far, huh? Joe looked down peering into his mug, yep, Dan. Danny furrowed his brow a bit, picking at the wood and stone bar top with his dirty fingernails. Hey, Joe, is Mama going to be okay? Joe looked over at the bartender. Michael was a gruff old man, but good strong counsel when you needed him to be such. Yeah, I suppose Dan. It's spring so I suppose. Joe finished his beer and rubbed his black head of hair. He then gave a stern look at Dan. You know I get tired of this shit. Dan sipped his beer a bit gingerly, winching at his brother's remark. Jojo, I'm sorry you get tired and all. Joseph shook his head forlornly, looking down at the base of his empty mug. Nah, Dan, nope. Dan smiled happily at Joe, content that he had done no wrong to his brother. Good Joe, Joe. Hey, you gonna get another beer? Page 2. Joe glanced once more at Mike. Yeah, Mike, one more. Michael was over at the far side of the bar washing mugs and glasses. Yep, Joe. Another bud, wiping his hands on a rag as he spoke. Joe took a deep breath. He was so tired these days. A few moments of peace passed. He noticed someone out of the corner of his eye, remembering the beer he had wanted. Yeah, Mike, another one. Mike nodded, pulled a frosty cold mug from a lower bar refrigerator, pulling the tap, the amber ale filling the mug. How is the family doing, Joe? You don't talk much about them anymore. Yeah, I know, Mike. Joe turned a bit in his bar stool to view the raven-haired woman at the other end of the bar who was sitting at a small table. She seemed to be watching them and at the same time watching the light traffic on the road. Michael brought the freshly poured beer over to Joseph, flipping a cardboard coaster, setting the beer on it. He rubbed his beard. You really should loosen up a bit. Relax, Joe, families are families, they all have issues. Joe turned to the woman a bit further. Yeah, Mike. The woman gave Joe a crooked smile and took a sip of her scotch on the rocks. Danny abruptly and quite loud remarking to them both, Yep, Mikey, families do have families, at what Michael had said to Joseph. Michael, hearing Danny, cheerfully walked away nodding to himself. That's true. Danny boy, very true. Danny smiled, very satisfied to have pleased Michael's sense of humor and irony. Page 3. What are we going to do when we get home, Joe? Joe shrugged, don't know, Dan, don't know. Hearing Joe's answer, Danny began to settle down again. It grew quiet in the bar. Joe sipped his beer and went back to watching the baseball game. Danny suddenly looked far out into space, which he did from time to time. Joe never could figure out why. He had some ideas and brought them up to his mom, but Mama Cruse never looked into it. Danny seemed always to be a bit slower than most people were, to the family he just was born that way. Danny was born slow and big, and as he grew up, he grew even bigger. Joe's brother was always a bit of an oddity to most people, especially when he and Danny paired up together to go out in public. Joe didn't mind so much. However, sometimes, and for some unknown reason to Joe, it bothered other people. If Danny's oddities did not bother him so much, Joe figured, why should it bother anyone else? After all, Joe had to live with him, besides everyone had his or her peculiarities. Joe was only 5'8" at Best while Danny stood 6'5", 230 pounds, mostly muscle. Danny seemed to wake from his trance and drank a bit more of his beer. "Joe, you're going to school soon?" Joe shook his head. Yes, soon, pretty soon, but you know Joe, I am just a drive or a phone call away. Danny rubbed his face, feeling the stubble that had quickly grown. He never could get shaving down well like his brother even though he was 30. "Yep, Jojo. But I can't drive." "No Danny, that's true, but I can drive." Dan smiled innocently. "I don't get it." Joe smiled back and took another sip of his beer, a bit more cheerfully now. "But I understand it Danny, and that's what matters." Page 4. Danny smiled deeper, showing more teeth. "Yep, Joe, true." Danny found the woman in the corner this time as well and smiled at her. She caught his smile and smiled back at him. Danny blushed, returned to his beer and then the TV screen. The Yankees had runners on first and third with 2 outs in the 6th. Danny looked at Joe, scrunching his face. "Clean up, huh?" Joe nodded in agreement with his brother. "Yep." Danny, still a bit anxious, leaned into Joe. "Hey, there is a girl over there." Joe whispered to him, "I know Joe, I know." Danny a bit louder, speaking enthusiastically, abruptly, "Well, go and talk to her." Joe yelled under his voice at him. "Shut up, Danny." Danny frowned, whispering in Joe's ear, "What did I do?" Joe shook his head and peered over at the woman again. "Nothing Danny, just nothing." She smiled at Joe, tipping her glass to him and motioned a bit for him to come over. Joe put his near empty mug down, with a deep sigh, and decided to go over. Danny bounding behind him, for a big man like Joe that in itself was amazing. Joe pulled a seat and flipped it around. He sat down. "Hello." Danny pulled a seat up to himself, falling into it. "Hello." The woman tossed her long black hair back. "Hello, name is Donna." Joe pulled his seat closer. "My name is Joseph and this is my brother, Danny." Danny held out one of his massive hands to her. "Name is Danny. It's nice to meet you, Donna." Page 5. Donna a bit awkwardly holding out her hand, surprised at Danny's sheer openness. "Hello, Danny." "Yep, Danny and Joe, nice to meet you, Donna," Danny said, shaking her hand eagerly and a bit too hard. Joe having a bit too much of it, cutting into Danny's eagerness sharply. "I haven't seen you here before. We frequent this bar, it's local for Danny and me. In fact, why Mike over there has known us since we were only knee-high to him." Michael had overheard his name, waved a smile and a wet rag at them. "That's right, of course. Although, I don't think Dan was ever knee-high though," laughing heartily. Donna laughed quietly to herself as well. Danny thought about what Mike had said. He was not quite sure that it was funny. But in the end he decided to laugh along with them while Joe rubbed his forehead, which seemed to be gathering stress. Joe was getting a headache. "So, Donna, what brings you around this town?" Donna finished her scotch, holding it up for Mike to see and placing it back on its coaster. "Well, originally I was looking for a place to live around here. I found a decent rental and now I am just checking out the area. I wanted to see this place and so here I am." Joe nodded as Mike came over with another scotch, Joseph debating internally whether he should give her his number or something. He had a girlfriend, but he thought it was good to meet new people, or at least that was what he tried to convince himself of. Joe was just so sick of the way things were. Maybe dreams do come true if you fight for Page 6. Them, or maybe he just needed a change. Maybe school would be the thing for an aging 27-year-old. Joe's thoughts drifted, becoming more complicated than he would have liked. So he pulled out of them. However, as Joe was about to break his train of thought, then, attempting to give Donna his phone number, Danny abruptly broke it for him. "You're real pretty, Donna." Joe yelped, but still smiled. "Danny." Donna blushed and smiled. Donna's high cheekbones now red, matching her spring blouse and skirt. Yes, Danny was of course right, but did he have to voice all his thoughts? Mike was drying mugs, watching the exchange from behind his defensive bunker position, amused. Joe rubbed his hair, holding his hands out. "Look, I am sorry. Dan, well, he is a bit slow." Danny nodded in partial agreement. Donna gave Danny a warm look of care. Joe frowned, but then forced a smile. "Listen, Dan is right. I would like to give you my number, and maybe we could go and do something. Nightlife is good around here, sometimes." Donna sipped her drink and thought for a moment, looked again at Danny and then nodded. "Yeah, sure." She took out a pen and a scrap of paper from her purse. "Here you go, guys." Joe took the paper and pen. He wrote his name down, his number, and gave it to her. "There you go, Donna." Donna looked at the scrap. "Okay, Joe." Joe stood up, pulling Danny up as well by the shoulder. "We will see you around. Hopefully." Danny gave a big nod. "I hope so too." Donna looked up at them and then at Dan. "I hope so as well." Page 7. Joe went to the bar, gave Mike a 20 and then left, pulling Dan by the shirt sleeve. As they left the tavern, Danny went on, scratching his face. "Should you have paid for her?" Joe, a bit angry. "Shut up, Dan, I was nervous, okay?" Danny smiled. "I wasn't." Joe pulled open the driver's side door of his car. "Get in." Danny nodded at Joe. "Sure thing, Jojo, I hope the Yanks will win that game." They never did find out. Joseph pulled his rusted Buick into the parking space in the back of the trailer. Their mom, Danny, and he rented. Joe, years later, always remembered the address as 69. And 1/2 because to him it seemed they were not worthy of a full home, only a half of a one to call their own. Joe thought about how idiotic it seemed, but still the thought made him feel so bad. Oh, well, Joe thought, one more day in paradise. He saw his mother through the trailer's big plastic window panes. Joe knew that by the way she was sitting on the couch, in the corner, partly facing the wall, that they were in for trouble. He glanced over at Danny. Luckily, Buicks were full-sized cars, otherwise Danny would not have fit. Maybe he would have had to strap him to the roof or something, Joe thought to himself. Then, returning to his mother in the corner, he directed Danny. "Get out." "Okay, Jojo." They each closed the doors of the Buick with a slam. Joe thought that one day he wanted to jump out of the window onto the ground like they did in the old Dukes of Hazzard show. But after a moment Joe thought better of it, because he probably would. Page 8. Break his legs, and Dan, well, he would just be caught in the doorframe. Joe and Danny went up to the steel door of the trailer. Trailers were metal after all, because they were bus-like. Danny saw Joe fishing for his keys. "Joe, why you getting the keys? Mom is inside." Joe looked at him and winced, pulling out his keys. "Yeah, I know, Joe. I know." Joe put the key in, turned the lock, and they both entered. As Joe stepped in and before he could say, "Hi Mom," she had made her way to the kitchen, picked up a used bowl from the sink and threw it at him. Joe and Danny ducked as the bowl narrowly missed Joe's head and crashed into the doorframe. She screamed. "Get out!" Joe yelled back. "Ma, Wait. She screamed again, even louder, piercing Joseph's ears. Get out now, you evil demons. Joe moved closer to her, holding out his palms, sweaty from the ordeal. Danny slunk back behind Joe near the television. Listen, Mom, it's me, Joe, your son. Don't you lie to me, you evil thing, you. Joe beginning to get angry. Damn it, what the fuck? Take your medicine, Ma. Don't you force those poison pills on me, you Satan. Danny stepped forward a bit. Mama, it's Danny. Mama Cruse picked up a broom, waving it menacingly at Joe and then at Danny. Creeping closer to them. You brutes, you pigs. Get out. Page 9. Joe rubbed his head, sweating. Dan, let me handle it, please. Danny was starting to cry. For such a big man as Danny it was a rarity, but he was a different kind of man. God broke the mold when he created him, which according to most who knew Danny was an excellent thing to have happened. Seeing his brother cry, Joe took a deep breath. All right, we are going, you happy? Mama Cruse took her broom. Why, yes. Now get and don't come back, you pigs. Joe motioned to Danny while grabbing his shoulder, pulling him out of the house. And then slamming the door behind them. Listen, don't cry, Danny. Danny buried his head in Joe's chest, Joe almost falling over from the weight of Danny's body on him. Why, Jojo, why? Joe motioned for him to get into the car. I don't know, but we got each other. Brother. Danny wiped away his tears and both he and Joe returned to the Buick. We can't come back. Danny always such questions when Mama Cruse got that way, which was becoming more frequent now that she was getting older, it seemed. Joe started the car. Dan, you know we can come back, smiling at him half-heartedly. We can come back tomorrow in the night, then I think she will be a bit more settled. For some unknown reason that usually was the case. If Mama Cruse was as sick as she was, as night set in she would usually calm down a bit. Perhaps it was the dark that made it so, or the peace that should come with it, but to Joe it didn't matter, just the end result. Joe pulled the Buick out of 69 1/2 as he looked behind in the rear. Page 10. View mirror toward the tin can semi-like house. The image reminded him that the rent would be due soon, and with that knowledge in his head, more worried than before, Joe pinched the bridge of his nose. Joe now suffering from a headache. We're just going to get a room for the night at the Super 8 and camp out. Danny smiled, wiping away the remainder of his tears. I like camping out. Joe smiled, quickly glancing at his brother and then the traffic out on the main road. I know you do, Dan, and try not to cry. Danny looked lovingly at his brother. Okay, Jojo. Joe himself reserved his tears for later. He would cry later that night in the bathroom of the Super 8 room they rented for the night, on the toilet, sobbing quietly with his hands in his face while his brother slept soundly. He was always an adult, never a child, always a parent and never a son. Joe inserted the key into the door of their hotel room at the Super 8, which happened to be located right down the road from them, only a few miles at best. Craig, the night shift manager, was there sitting behind the front desk. He was busy drinking down cup after cup of coffee. Joseph thought a good cup of coffee for himself might be a decent idea after they got something to eat, maybe takeout, delivery, or whatever they could afford. Joe opened the door to their new home for the night and waved his hand. Welcome to the King's Palace, Danny. Hey, Jojo, this is the same room we had last time. Joe gave a weak smile. Well, how about that, Danny? Danny turned on the light, then dumped himself on the bed, his rather large frame. Page 11. Shaking it with the coils groaning underneath. Hey, Jojo, can we make bed tents tonight? Joe closed the door behind himself. Maybe Dan, maybe, how about pizza? Danny smiled a big grin. It did not take much to make him happy, which was a good thing. Danny's congenial nature did make Joe's life a bit easier, because for Joe the weight of the world was stacked like bricks upon his back. He wanted them off of it. Joe took another slice of pizza and a sip of his coffee. Danny had another piece. Already half in his mouth, the sheets and pillows of his bed all strewn about the motel room. He turned on the television, and after a few minutes of flicking through the channels, a commercial for a regional trade school came on the air. Danny thought a moment and looked over at his brother. Are you going to school this year? Joe finished his slice of pizza and took a swig of coffee. He held the cup and started to chew on it. I hope so, I am registered and all. I want to do well when I get there though. Dan looked down at his bed. Do well in school? You're smart, Jojo. Joseph nodded. I know, but I mean well in life too. I mean now I am in my 20s, Dan, and I want to be a success. Danny nodded again. You are, Jojo. To you, Dan, but not to me. I want to not only help myself, but help you, help Mama and help others. Dan looked back at the television, switching the channel, then a bit confused about page 12. The whole matter, entering in deep thought. Why? Joe took a long sigh and finished his coffee from chewed up cup. Dan, you know. I want to help people, kids, whomever, so they don't get the shit life we have. I have. Dan, now noticing that Joe was yelling a bit, ending the conversation with, okay, Joe. Joe pulled at the hair at the back of his head, in a low tone. I have. Dan waited a few minutes, then returned his thoughts to the chaos that was his bed, looking at all the handiwork he had accomplished in just a few short hours. Can we make tents? Joe frowned, looking at the rows of cheap wooden paneling then lined the walls of their double bedroom. Yeah, sure. Dan jumped up a bit. Okay, Joe, sure. The next day Joseph found himself dumping off his brother at his mom's house. It seemed sometimes that Danny gobbled up conversation like an old-fashioned church wife. Danny went on, picking at his sizable teeth, the car windows open to let the morning air into the car. We got a good morning, Jojo. Joe looked into his rear-view mirror. Yeah, Dan, sure. Danny smiled into his side passenger mirror. Joe, why does the mirror say objects in mirror are closer than they appear? Don't know, Dan. Page 13. Danny grinned a toothy grin in the side view mirror. It just makes my teeth too big. Joe laughed, glancing at his brother. Danny, that's because they are big. Danny gave Joe a dirty look, which made Joe laugh even more. Dan shook it off so easily. Joe, what about that woman? Joe was nearing their house. What woman are you talking about? The woman yesterday, her name was Donna, right? Suppose, Dan. What's she around for? Is she going to be back at Cruse? Can we go there and find out? Jojo. Joe pulled alongside their trailer, viewing his mother watching a morning show on the television. She seemed okay from that distance, Joseph thinking that she could have gone back on her medication. Sometimes the medication hit her fast, and other times it took a few days to take effect. Joe motioned to his brother. Get out. Danny gave Joe a forlorn look. What if she's nasty again and throws a pen at me? She seems okay from here. Look, she is opening the door for you. Mama Cruse stepped out with her nightgown still on, her hair unkempt and wild. But she smiled and motioned to them. Dan, seeing her this way, turned to his brother and said, "Well." Joe reached over and pulled the inside handle on Danny's door. "She is okay now. She probably has breakfast for you ready." Page 14. Danny, hearing about food, especially the thought of eggs and bacon, made him smile. "What about you?" Joe shook his head. "No, Danny, I got other stuff to do." Danny nodded okay and closed the door behind him, not looking back. Joe pulled out of their parking spot and drove off without much stuff to do at all. Joseph drove down King Street and found a place to park parallel to Broadway. He was going to see Kevin at his apartment, which was to him very close to a prison cell, with its old steel door and its iron bars on the windows. It was, as far as Joe concerned, a one-unit slumlord dump about as big as his bedroom in their trailer. Kevin did not have to worry about crossfire from rival gangs, but he did have a nasty issue with roaches all about his apartment. Joseph always checked his shoes after visiting him just because of it. He did not want any hitchhikers taking him for a ride. He walked along King Street running into Paco. Paco was an old-time drug user who still shot up every now and then. People who knew Paco well enough said he was straight and on methadone, but no one could verify it. Unfortunately, years of living hard had taken its toll on him. Paco was now a pitted and pock-marked old man who had lost his legs due to his poor health. He had reduced himself to sitting in a wheelchair all day outside his own apartment, season after season, unless or until it got too cold for him to do so. Joseph tried to avoid Paco, but Paco yelled at him, practically wheeling Joseph over as he met him on the street. Paco gave him a toothless yell. "Hey, you got smokes?" "No, Pacific." Page 15. Paco pulled at his bundled pants. "Just one cig? One man? Give you a quarter." Joe hurried past him, Paco's face scarred as much as what was left of his forearms, pasting back his long white hair in the summer heat. Joseph looking back. "No. Pac, no smokes, don't smoke." Paco yelled at him one last time, at Joseph's back, who was now almost on Broadway. "You puto, you gringo bastard." Joseph just sighed and shrugged. He had been called worse by his mom. Joseph walked down the block to the 3-story brick walk-up where Kevin lived. It was like most of the buildings in the lower part of the city, very old and very broken down. Joe rapped his knuckles on the graffiti-riddled steel front door. The door made a hollow sound. He waited a few minutes, a few people walking by him, wondering why he looked like a tourist in some forbidden land. Joseph itched the back of his neck. It was hot out already. He banged again on the door, this time hurting his hand in the process. The metal door looked like it could take a mortar shell and still hold. A few more minutes passed and then Kevin cracked the door a bit. Joe peered in. "Hey, Kevin, how is it going?" Kevin nodded, with long lanky black hair and a grizzled goatee. He looked like he had previously slept a few days in the same clothes. "Yeah, I'm living, I guess." Joe shrugged. "Okay. Good, can I come in?" Kevin rubbed his eyes. "Yeah, oh yeah, come on in, sorry." Page 16. Kevin let Joseph in and they climbed up the building's steep steps to Kevin's room on the 3rd floor. Kevin wedged open his room door and let Joseph in first. Joseph looked around the one-room apartment. The place was simply a wreck. Everything from used food containers, to old clothes, old garbage bags of odds and ends, to computer parts and electronic junk was strewn about, partially covering Kevin's mattress, which was also on the floor. Joseph stepped over the objects that looked most likely to be able to puncture his shoes. "So, Kevin, Kevin sighed. Hey man, sorry about the mess. Joseph saw a roach scurry for a place to feel safe in the piles. Yeah, well what did you need? Kevin found a chair and pulled it over to Joe. You want to sit? Joe looked at the stained chair and Kevin's surroundings again. There was a huge hole in the wall, and out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw a rodent peek out from under some blankets. Nah, Kevin. Kevin, seeing Joseph surrender the offer, took the seat himself, rubbing his eyes again and coughing a bit. I need some money. Joseph nodded. Well okay, I mean what do you need Kev, a 20? Kevin shook his head no and coughed again. It was even hotter up on the third floor than outside. No, I need more. How much more? Kevin looked completely worn, older than his 30 years of age should put him. A hard life can do that to you. About 1,000. Page 17. Joe's eyes widened. Kevin man, what the fuck? Why do you need so much money? Kevin looked down. Joe shot a serious stare at him. What happened? What did you get into? I owe money, and in a real hard way. To who? For what? Kevin pulled his hair back. Man, Joe, I owe Omar that money. Joseph turned his back at Kevin for a moment, thinking, and then turned to him again. Damn it Kevin. You know, Omar will break your damn legs if he does not shoot you and dump you in the Hudson River first. Kevin seemed like he was about to cry. I know. Listen, Kevin, I don't have that kind of money. I know, but maybe some. Joe could not believe what was happening. Kevin, you're a fool you know. Yeah, maybe. Kevin placed his head on the back of the chair. Maybe you could give me a bit to get Omar off my back, and then I could get the rest later, myself. Joseph frowned. Kevin, what happened to us? It seems like only yesterday we were in high school. Chapter 2. Page 18. I told you get out, you beast you. Mama Cruse yelled at them, pounding up and down the narrow hall of the trailer the Cruse family called home, or hell depending on the day. Joseph looked at Danny as he packed a few bags. Danny, I am sorry you have to put up with this from Mama and all. Danny gave a frightened look at Mama Cruse, who was slamming things around. Pots, pans and the broom. Danny grabbed a few pairs of socks for Joseph, handing them over to him. Joe, what about the TV and all, why she let it go? Don't remind me, Joseph said, giving Danny a steely but loving look. He just had to be firm. He knew very well that she did not pay the bill on purpose. Danny, I will help you pay it this month. Danny was very uncomfortable, still dancing a bit around, squirming a bit at the loud noise a pan made as Mama Cruse dropped it onto the kitchen floor. But, Joe, I can't. Joseph had to get away from this. Look, Danny, I can't be everywhere and I can't be nowhere, which is right here. I can't babysit this house and this family forever. I mean, where the hell is the rest of this family? Huh? Danny found a paper binder. This too? Joe nodded. You can put that in my backpack. Danny peeked into the other room as Mama Cruse began to quiet down. Mama. Cruse turned to him and brushed her brunt auburn hair back. I hate you and your brother, but you especially, Damon Seed. Page 19. Danny, seeing this, scampered back to Joe, his large frame reverberating through the metal trailer, pleading. Joe. Joseph was sick of it. Danny, listen, she is full of it. Just deal with it for now. I have been the adult and the parent of this family long enough. I have to go. I have to see Kevin, and then I am out to college for the semester. I won't be that far. I am just a phone call away. Danny began to cry a bit, finding some underwear, a t-shirt and handing them to Joseph. I aren't smart like you, Joe. I am just Danny. Joe closed his eyes and took a deep breath. I will help you if you should need it. But what you need is time and I need time. When you really need me, I will be there. You can do more than you ever thought you could. I know you, Dan, and you're smarter than you think. Danny smiled a weak smile. Yeah, you think, Jojo. Joseph drove around and found some parking near Kevin's apartment on Broadway. He skipped putting a quarter in the meter. The city never checked those things. Anyway, they had bigger troubles to deal with on a daily basis. Joe stepped out of his car, locked the door and ran up to Kevin's front door. Joseph felt his wallet. He had $100 cash and he sure did not want to lose it. Joe waited hesitantly, looking back and forth down the sidewalk. Kevin did not answer. Joseph knocked louder, hurting his hand. Once again. He hated steel doors. After a few minutes, Joseph remembered what Kevin had said about Omar and became concerned. He thought a moment and then headed down the street to find Paco. Paco was trying to hide from the sun under the small overhang of the bar room at page 20. The ground floor of his building. Paco was picking at his long, greasy hair, rolling a cigarette from a little loose tobacco someone have given him. He fumbled with the paper, and some of the tobacco fell on the ground. Paco looked down and the cigarette paper dropped to the sidewalk as well. He reached forlornly for the paper, but he was too high up in his wheelchair, the old cracked tires putting the paper just out of reach of his fingertips. Joe rushed over to him, Paco noticing out of the corner of his eyes, looking up. What you want, gringo? Joe felt his wallet again. You know where Kevin is? He ain't my brother. Joe wiped the sweat from his brow. You know everything, Paco, you snoop. Everywhere. Paco reached again for the paper. Joe picked it up and held between his thumb and forefinger, creasing it. Paco looked up. You're an ass. Joseph went to walk away. Well, Paco, I thought I would ask. I am just concerned. Paco shook his head, holding out his hand. Check the local crack house, he's a pipe sucker anyway. Joseph gave him the paper. Okay, Paco, but you're not so hot yourself. Paco took the paper and asked, a little more politely. You have a cigarette? Joe began to walk away and waved low behind him, disgusted. No. Paco shook his fist at him and in doing so lost the paper again. Shit, you fool. Run your ass over. Page 21. Joseph yelled behind him, now down the street. Thanks, Pacific. He ran down Broadway towards the riverfront. Joseph did not honestly know where to go to find his friend. He paused, catching his breath as he felt the butterflies in his stomach gnaw at him. Joe felt a wave of queasiness roll up into his chest as he turned down a side alley. There, by some unknown miracle, he found Kevin, wedged in a gutter between two buildings. He was on his knees, slumped over, with the wall of one of the buildings holding him up, keeping him from falling over completely. Joseph ran over and pulled him up. Kevin's face was smashed, his cheek and nose fractured, blood all over his face, his shirt, and jeans. Joseph shook him. Kevin, what the hell happened? He tried to talk, but he was half conscious. Joe shook him again, attempting to keep him conscious. Kevin, man, what happened? Kevin pulled away, spit blood, teeth, and wiped his mouth. Someone jumped me. Joseph grabbed his friend and helped him out of the gutter. Come on Kev, I'll take you to the hospital. I got some money for you too. Johnny's bar was nothing more than a hole in the wall on Carter Street in Townley. David was sitting half off a ripped bar stool taking double shots of Jack. He was eyeing his girl Tanya's backside as she moved around the dim room, her jeans one size too small. The bar was dark and musty. The poor old air conditioner wedged into the back wall of the room was struggling to maintain its dignity by cooling off the area. It was failing miserably. There was a ragged pool table in the center of the bar taking up too much space. Omar was summing up the situation on the table, while a few others were sitting here or there, most of them drunk and sweaty. David with a gold ring on each. Page 22. Finger motioned for Tanya to come over to him. David laughed. Watch him miss that. Shit. Omar leaned over the table as he gave a glance over to David and his opponent. An old Jamaican with silvery dreads. Jude looked like he had played pool right from out of the womb. Omar took a shot and missed. Angrily, Omar pulled the stick back and slammed the base of it on the floor. Shit. Jude smiled a weary smile and set up for his shot. David laughed again, Tanya now sitting on his lap. You can't play Omar. You got no damn game. Omar looked down for a moment, picking up his beer and with a swig. Hey, I gots. Jude took his shot, then another and then cleaned up the game. He held his hand out. Omar, you play like a white boy and now you owe me 300. Omar wiped the sweat off his brow, pulling out his roll. It wasn't much. He pulled off of it $300 bills and slapped it in his hand. You are all right, old man. Jude dismissed his remark with a wrinkled smirk and pushed his gray-white dreads back, double. Omar looked uneasy. He had racked up a lot of debt lately, especially in pool, but he wanted more. Yeah. Tanya spoke low to David. He is a fool. David nodded, never said he wasn't. Tanya stood up, David slapping her backside as she went over to Omar. She pulled Omar's shirt and whispered into his ear. Omar, you don't have the money. Page 23. Omar shook his head no, turning to her as Jude racked. Shut your mouth, Tanya. What do you care? Tanya shrugged. You want to bury yourself. Omar closed his eyes for a second, again wiping the sweat from his face with his short sleeve. Listen, I'll pay back what I owe David. Jude smiled. You break. He lived long enough to know when to quit, his friend. Omar did not. Susan's apartment was poorly decorated with several odds and ends she had found in a few garage sales. Realistically, dollar store affair was the best she could do with the way she managed her money. Donna sat down on Susan's velvet couch, leaning back. She smiled, passing a half-empty bottle of vodka to Omar. Omar was sitting on a mismatched love seat with Susan spread limply over him. Omar took the bottle and drank right from it. After a swallow, he tried to pass the bottle to Susan. Susan turned to him, half awake, dismissing him. Omar again pushed the bottle to her. Here. She took a groggy swipe at it. No. Omar pushed the bottle at her for the second time. Here, woman. What, you can't take it no more. Susan pulled herself up and turned to him, her face plastered with her hair. She pulled it back again. Omar, gimme, I put you under, fool, she growled, grabbing the bottle and drinking, slopping down a shot and passing the bottle back to Donna. Omar angry, hey, I don't need you or your attitude. Page 24. Susan sat up, pointing a finger at him. I don't need your ass either. Donna took a swig from the bottle. Hey, listen people. Omar leaned back half asleep again. Yeah, man, you all are sounding like David. Susan fell back down on Omar. Least he's got. Omar showed a bit of teeth. Got what? Nothing. You owe him more than your ass, that is for sure, Susan bit back. I owe him, yeah, but not that much. You owe him and he will break your legs, my old man. Omar leaned over on a pillow. Whatever woman, whatever. Donna stumbled up, held onto the couch and put on the stereo. The music was loud, reverberating on the floor and into the apartment's walls. Now cool off. Omar closed his eyes. Kevin owes and I'll shake him and a few others yet. Again. Donna sat back down, expecting the heavy beats to keep Omar awake, but instead, it seemed to lull Omar to sleep. Susan pulled herself up again, looking angrily at Omar. See, look at him, he can't hold shit anyway. Omar slid deeper into the love seat, now snoring loudly. Donna nodded in agreement. Well, he is what he is. Susan stood up a bit wobbly herself, then grabbing her purse. He does not want. Page 25. To do nothing with his life but gangbang. He is going to get killed and leave me with crap. I am getting tired of his weak show. Donna shrugged. Well, you do what you need to do, Susan. Susan huffed an exhausted breath out. I am going to the Sammy's. Sammy's was the corner store. Donna looked for her pack of cigarettes. She found a crumpled one stuffed next to her on the couch. She dug into the pack and found one last cigarette. Wait, Donna said, finding her purse and pulling out a 10, get me a pack. 2. Susan nodded and went out. Donna started thinking about Omar and then drifted to Danny. Omar began to wake up again as Donna lit her cigarette. She looked at him for a while, got up and went over to the stereo to change the CD. Omar, now more awake, watched Donna bend low. Donna turned around to see Omar smile at her. Donna moved quietly over to him. Omar slouched further down in the love seat. Donna, woman. Donna moved in closer to Omar, Omar pulling her toward his body. She leaned down on him. Omar, you need better, baby. I know your mind. Omar grabbed her waist and the back of her neck. Donna, I need your help. Susan got out her old red Chevy, closing the door behind her. She looked up at the brownstone before her, a bit of sun glaring into her eyes. She placed her keys in her purse and walked up to the door. A few guys at the corner of another apartment building next to its stoop were eyeing her. She gave them an icy glance as they held their hands near their groins. Susan knocked and waited for Donna to come down. After a moment in page 26. The late August sun, Donna opened the door. She pushed her hair back. Hey, Susan. Come on in. Susan took a drink of her beer. Donna was watching some mid-morning talk show on her television. Whatever show it was, the guests seemed to be arguing, fighting and generally beating on each other. Donna sat down with her beer and drank. I know he needs money, but I don't have any and it's his own damn fault. Susan leaned forward. Listen, he needs bad and you know he does. David will dump him in the Hudson if he doesn't pay. Donna nodded. And Susan picked at her nails. I need him right now. He lets me slide on my tab. I ain't got anybody. Donna gave out a dismissive sigh and a bit angry, open-handed in exasperation. Susan, that's why he is in the grave. And you can get who you need. Are you saying he is a fool for lending me a hit or two? He is my man, what have you got? Donna got up. I got Jake and you got to go. Susan put the beer down and stood up. Listen, I am sorry. I need him and he'll get you your shit too. Donna looked back at an open pack of cigarettes on the coffee table. Yeah, I will. Talk to Jake. Tell him to get his score from Kevin, he owes. Susan put her beer down and grabbed her purse. Yeah, I know. Page 27. Donna motioned for Susan to head for the door. We all got probs, it a screwed up world. I know Donna, I know. Joseph rushed into the Greenberg Hospital emergency room entrance, the doors neatly gliding open and then closing behind him. Joe looked hesitantly around finding the intake specialist. He stepped over to the front desk. The young woman looked up at him. Admitting, she said, questioning him. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, taking a deep breath. Yes, I want to see my mother. She looked matter of fact at him, as if it was all routine. Name, sir. Cruse, Betty Cruse. She typed in the name. And you name? Joe wiped his head again. Joseph Cruse. The admitting specialist looked up the record for Betty. Ah yes, you're down as a contact person. She looked back pointing, ER bed 112, here is a tag. She reached over, pulled a clip and handed it to him, go through the door and ask the triage nurse to see her. Joseph nodded. Thank you. She frowned. Page 28. Joseph pushed through the ER doors and found room 112. Mama Cruse was there. In the bed. Danny was there, the doctor talking to them, a pale blue curtain providing her with some privacy. Joseph met Mama Cruse's eyes, then Danny's. Danny, what the hell is going on? How the hell did you get here? Danny nodded. Yup, Jojo, I went in the ambulance. Joseph was beside himself. What going on, Mama? Mama Cruse looked over to Joseph. Oh, well son. The doctor pulled Joseph aside. You're Mrs. Cruse's other son. Yes, doctor. The doctor moved him farther away from his mom and his younger brother. She has lost a lot of fluids and her kidneys are in poor condition. How long has she been like this? Joseph placed his hands in his pockets, took them out again and rubbed the back of his head. What do you mean? I didn't know any of this was going on. Nobody tells me anything, least of all my mom. The doctor looked back at Betty Cruse and Joe smiling away now, sitting next his mom, holding her hand. Well, I would like to keep her for a few days, run some tests. Joe nodded. Yeah, sure, but it is really up to her? She kind of does what she wants. The doctor smiled, pulling out a pen. Yes, I see. Is she on any psychotropics? Have a mental illness of any kind? Page 29. Joseph looked back at them both. She is on a whole slew of stuff, yeah that is. When she takes them. The doctor flipped some pages of the chart he held, pen ready. Can you list them for me? She doesn't know offhand. Joseph turned to the corner for a second, looking at one of the stainless steel trays with all the gauze and gloves on it, turning back to the doctor. Oh, God. The doctor smiled, Yes. Chapter 3. Omar walked about the green felt table in the humidity of Johnny's bar. The dark, only illuminated by the light above the table and near the counter. Omar was smoking a cigarette and fiddling with his pool stick as his opponent hit a combo, eliminating 2 more billiard balls, taking them off the table. The guy smiled, looking up as he prepared for another shot. Omar, maybe I could take this one. Omar scoffed at him, taking a puff of his cigarette and downing a shot of whiskey. rolling it between his teeth and swallowing. He set the empty glass on the table next to him. Yeah, whatever. His opponent hit another billiard into a corner pocket, then another in a side end. Missed his third, saying, "Shit," afterwards, pounding the butt of the stick on the dirty, carpeted floor. Omar smiled and chalked his stick. "Now," he laughed, "now, I get you." As he, page 30, leaned over the table, lining up the tip of his stick to the cue, "Now, I kick your ass," Omar said as he hit one in, then another and missed his fourth. They were playing 8-ball. The only balls left on the pool table were Omar's 13 and the 9, while his opponent only had the 7. His opponent smiled, pointing to the corner pocket, 7, corner pocket. As Omar's opponent hit the ball in, Omar poured another shot for himself and quickly downed it. Unfortunately, by that time, Omar had become very drunk, the liquor affecting his game. However, he did not seem to think it did. His opponent eyeing Omar take another drink, then moved around the table, as one of his friends finished his game and came over to watch the finish of Omar's opponent pointed. 8-ball in the corner pocket. Omar nodded as his opponent hit the ball into the pocket. Shit. His opponent and his friend fist-pounded each other. He then held out his hand. "Okay, Omar, cough up the money." Omar pulled some cash out of his pocket. He counted it and handed what he had to the guy, slapping it into his hand. "Here." The guy looked at it and counted the crumpled bills. It was about 20 in change. "Hey, Omar, what the hell is this? You owe me 100. The front doors to the pool hall opened and Kevin came in. He was still a bit bloody from a few days ago. Omar glanced quickly at Kevin and then at his opponent. "I ain't got it." His opponent and his friend crowded in on Omar. "What do you mean, don't have it?" Omar pushed his opponent back. "Get out of my face." The two guys, seeing this, page 31, grabbed at Omar's collar. "Get off me!" Omar yelled, pulling the cue stick and hitting the winner over the shoulder, splitting the stick in two. Down he went, slumping over, holding his neck and shoulder. The winner's friend then knocked Omar down, as a crowd, including Kevin, rushed over. Omar jumped up and knocked over his friend. As the crowd pushed in, Omar staggering up, pulling out a pistol. "Listen, back off." He cocked the gun. "Listen, back the fuck off or you have a slug in your head." Kevin, needing a real fix, not very aware of the seriousness of the situation, broke through the slowly dissolving crowd. "Omar." Omar looked at him astonishingly, clutching the pistol. "What?" Kevin fell to his knees. "I need something, just to tide me over." Omar, with sweat pouring down his face, blood on his lip, shaking with rage. "You, asshole. I told you I will kill you, you motherfucker." Kevin cried out. "Please." Everyone in the pool hall could hear the police sirens. The police were on their way. Omar took the butt of his gun and hit the back of Kevin's head, the impact making cracking sound. "Damn you," quickly hitting him again in his face, as Kevin fell over, holding his head. Someone grabbed Omar from behind, Omar turning to assault him, the guy shaking him vigorously. "Go, Omar. We got to get the hell out of here, Popo is coming." Joseph leaned over, sitting near one of the clothing shops in Greenberg's Midtown Mall while he talked to his girlfriend Trisha on his cell phone. "Yeah, I should be up in a few days. I mean, I got to get out of here." Page 32. Trisha was packing at her house, holding her home phone up to one ear using her shoulder as support. "Well, We could sign a lease next semester, not this one but the next. Joe nodded, but frowned at the same time as others in the mall ambled by him. I know, but let me get this one semester done first. I got to get out of this town and for good. Trisha whispered something to her mom and then quickly returned to phone with Joe. Yeah, but don't you dream of making it big and then coming back home and building something, helping everyone who could not make it. Joseph leaned his neck back, cracking it. I need to make it first, Trish. These people here want nothing but the mall and players. They have no vision. Trisha packed a shirt or two in a box, eyeing her laptop. Yeah, well you're at the mall too, dear. Joe puckered his lips and then as he was about to counter her logic, he got another call. It beeped and he looked at the screen of his cell phone. It was unknown, but local. Hey, Trish, I have another call, I got to go. Trisha nodded. Could be the doctor. Maybe. Okay. Joe looked at the phone again. Got to go, Trisha, he said, then switched to the second phone call, placing the phone to his ear again. Hello. This is Dr. Dhawan, I need you to come to the hospital. I have your mother's page 33 tests back. I need to review them with you and your mom. Joe slumped over, holding the phone in one hand and his head in another. Okay, I will be over. Joe pulled his Buick into the parking lot of the hospital, motioning for Danny to get out of the car. Get out, Danny. Danny opened the door, looking over at Joseph. Jojo, are you coming? Joe turned the car off and opened his driver's side door. Yes, I am coming. Go. Danny. Okay, Jojo, Danny said with a weak, but comforting smile. Dr. Dhawan now had Mama Cruse up on the second floor of the hospital, sharing a room with another elderly woman who was watching television. A curtain separated Mama Cruse from the other patient just as before in the emergency room. The doctor took Joe aside, outside the room into the corridor while Danny sat with their mama, keeping her company. Joe though forlornly about how they never could afford television or phone service for their family members the few times they had been hospitalized. They were just too poor for such niceties. The doctor held Mama Cruse's chart in one hand. I ran some tests, urinalysis, liver enzyme. Your mother came back with an elevated white blood count and blood in her urine. Joseph nodded. Okay, so then when can she come home? Well, right now we have her on antibiotics and intravenous fluids, but we also took a MRI of her abdominal region and we found several masses. Page 34. Joe's throat tightened. And well, we believe they are cancerous. We will have to do a biopsy. Joe's heart sank as he leaned back on the wall behind him. Are you sure they're not benign? The doctor shook his head. I don't believe they are because the primary lesion has broken through the wall of the right ureter and there are secondary masses in her right kidney, her liver, and her lungs. A biopsy of the primary lesion will tell us more. Oh, my God, Joe whispered to himself, what can you do? Well, we can take the kidney and the ureter on that side and resect the liver, take the affected lobe out, then run her through chemo. However, she also takes several psychotropics and without that kidney and part of her liver we will at the minimum have to adjust her dosages downward and watch for toxicity. The fact that the cancer has obstructed her right kidney may be one reason she has been so mentally unstable lately. Joe let out a burst of anger. She is always unstable, then in a lower tone and remorseful, what are her chances? Well, not that good. The biopsy will tell us how virulent the mass is, its composition. A genetic assay can indicate what our best route of treatment. I would, though, advise you and your family to take it day by day. Jake slid open one of the glass back doors to his brick patio while carrying 2 margaritas. Donna leaned back, pushing her jet black hair to the side. Seeing Jake, she arched her back on one of the reclining deck chairs which were arrayed next to his in-ground pool. Jake watched her in her red bikini. He knew what she was but did not care. Page 35. At least not unless it affected him in a bad way. With that thought in his mind, he smiled to her and handed her a drink. Here you go, my dear. She took the drink and pushed the chair up, taking a sip from its straw. Thanks, doll. He sat down next to her, both of them tanning in the late summer sun. He thought about closing the pool. Donna thought about what she could say regarding Omar. She looked out over their shadowy blue reflections shimmering along the pool water. It seemed they were all living fake cellophane lives. What was real to her anymore? Did it matter? Why did it seem to her that she sold her soul for a few copper pennies? Jake flashed an image in his mind of both of them having sex in the pool. To Jake it was not about making love, but just sex. To him it was always about winning the next race, the next win, big or small. He elevated his deck chair, looking past the pool to his manicured back lawn. It's so nice out, Donna. Donna pushed her own thoughts away. Sure is, dear. Jake looked into the pool water and then at her. Hey Donna, want to take a dip? The water is warm today. Donna sipped her drink awkwardly, maybe in a minute, then thinking again about her friends. Hey, Jake. Jake disappointed and showing it. Yeah. She was about to say something when the phone began to ring from inside his large and well-appointed house. Jake, still annoyed, frowned and got up. I have to get the phone. In a moment he was back with the phone in his hand arguing with whomever was. Page 36. On the phone. Yeah, I know we have to get that part of the budget voted on. I know, he has been a bastard. Yeah, okay, Randy has been a bastard. I know, okay, bye. Jake hung up the phone with the press of a button, sat down next to Donna again and then placed the phone on his lap. Okay, where were we? Donna shrugged a bit. Who was that? Jake puffed, exasperated. That was Steve about Randy. Randy is on the city council and he has been a pain in my ass lately. Donna nodded, oh, sipping on her drink, then after a minute, I need to talk to you about something important, Jake. Jake, still annoyed and blurting out, what? Now Donna getting a bit angular about her relationship with him, but concealing her hurt except for the sharp tone in her voice. I want to talk about Susan and Omar. Jake placed his margarita on a table next to them both and stood up. He walked into his home and came out with a beer, sitting down and opening it up. What about Omar? That crackhead, what's he want besides money? Donna placed her drink down, turning to him. It's not always about money. You always think that, Jake. Jake, now quite angry. He is nothing but a two-bit drug dealer. Donna smiled a toothy cold grin. She had it and took it, now she gave it. He is your two-bit dealer. How do you think you got that hole in your fucking nose, Jay? You're a bitch, you know that. Donna got up. Listen, he needs some cash to keep going. Page 37. Jake leaned back, swallowing down his beer. Well, we all do, and he ain't getting shit from me. Donna walked over to the pool, her back to him. Well, I will tell him to hold your junk until I get what I want from you. Next time you might get someone who will rat your ass out to Popo. Jake, now enraged, stood up, smashing the bottle on the patio. I'll break his fucking legs. Donna turned to him as he grabbed her, slapping him, then scratching his face with her long nails. Don't touch me, don't you touch me. Jake held his face, a bit of blood now tracing down to his jaw. Donna. Donna took her keys from one of the tables. I am out of here, walked off the patio, down the stone path to the driveway and got into her car. She shivered as she locked the doors of her car and then quickly drove away. Joseph turned to Danny as a couple of nurses finished prepping Mama Cruse for surgery. Danny was beside himself, somewhat hysterical. They were in pre-op, a curtain separating the three of them, the nurses and another patient also waiting for an operating room bed. Joe grabbed Danny, looking up to him with his expansive frame. Although Danny had the power of an ox, he seemed weak as a newborn. It was all too much for Danny and almost too much for Joe. Joseph had to keep his head, if he did not, who would? In that family of his? Joe took Danny's shoulder and gave it a gentle shake. Keep it together, Danny. Mama is just going in to get a few things done and she will be out in an hour or two. Page 38. Danny looked over at Mama Cruse, who was resting, but awake, watching them both from the bed, her covers pulled up to keep her warm. Mama. Mama Cruse looked warmly at Danny and then at Joe. Mama loves you both very much. Joe knew it. Unfortunately, though, when she was off her medication she always said hurtful words that went and cut deep. I know, Mama. Danny smiled. I love you too, Mama, then turning to Joe, wiping his eyes, somewhat whispering, but, Joe, they're taking out cancer. Joseph grabbed both Danny's hand and Mama Cruse's hand, Mama Cruse smiling. I know, Danny, don't worry too much. Try to think about it like a tune-up for Mama. Mama Cruse nodded. Yes, Danny, think about it that way. Danny smiled weakly with big expansive eyes toward Joe. Like what you did with your Buick, Jojo. Joseph nodded as the surgeon came out to them with scrubs on, like that. Danny. The surgeon walked over to them as a nurse and two surgical techs followed. Okay, we're ready to go, folks. Danny turned away, cowering from the nurses. Joe grabbed Danny, pulling him up. As he slumped, he was a heavy burden as Joe lifted him up. The club beats were loud, the crowd pulsating with the reverberations of bass flickering through the floor and the people themselves. The strobe's lights danced around. Page 39. The room, driving the heat of the dancers around them, pulling at those who were content enough to sit at the bar or watch the moving skin from the tables. The Crash Club was wild that night, some heading over from Townley, or the local Fishkill area. They went to party, to chase the tiger, get their piece, get drunk or get screwed. Of course, there were the select few who wanted just to soak up the sweat, dance, or watch those who did. Trisha was at the bar sipping on a mojito, next to Tanya, who was drinking a beer. Tanya turned to Trisha and above the beats. You know, I see a lot of potential in David. Trisha nodded, not inclined to comment on what Tanya had said. Tanya looked over to David, who was sitting in a plush corner booth with a few of his friends. I mean, he could be a great business manager. He already is, but I think he could run the world. Joe had told Trisha about Kevin and she felt maybe she could find out more. Perhaps she could help Kevin and her boyfriend in the process. Hey, what's been going on with David and Omar? Tanya looked a bit suspiciously at Trisha but gave a crooked smile, turning about and leaning back somewhat on the bar stool. You know, Omar is always up David's craw. He is an ass half the time, smoking up what he is supposed to sell and gambling what he is supposed to hand off to David. Omar and his damn primos, what the hell, man. David is getting pressure from above because of Omar. Trisha nodded, yeah. His peoples owe him and he just lets it slide. Trisha finished up her drink, looked over to David and then to Joseph, who was at a table with Kevin, which she thought was unusual considering what was going on with Kevin and Omar. Joe was talking with Kevin, both with a whiskey sour. David. Page 40. Kevin hesitantly sipping his whiskey. Let's go, Joe, I don't want to be beat again. Joe looked over to Omar who was moving through the crowd. Look, I didn't know they would be here tonight. I just wanted to get out and about. I thought you could use some time away from your apartment, have a drink. Maybe I should take you to a rehab instead, I don't know. Kevin shook his head no, now whispering to Joe. Listen, Joe, your mom just had surgery and everything, we should go. Joe looked down at his drink. Yeah, she is home resting, Danny is watching her. There is nothing I can do right now. Kevin drank the whole whiskey, gulping it down, wiping his face with his sleeve. Right, I know. Listen, can we go? It's not your skin. Joe nodded, okay, all right. Like now, please. Joseph shook his head, finishing his drink. Okay. Tanya got up, no, Omar, and motioned for Trisha to go with her. Come on, let me show you to David. Trisha and Tanya made their way through the heat and sweat, through the dancing and the pounding noise around them. They moved through to the booth that held David. And now Donna, who had made her way seemingly at the same time from out of nowhere to sit beside David. Donna looked up from her martini, brushing her long black hair back. Well, hello, Tanya. Page 41. Tanya nodded, yeah, then barrel-eyeing David, David, this is Trisha, one of my friends. David eased back. Hey. Trisha looked at him and Donna slyly. Hello, David, and who is this? As Donna went to speak, Tanya intercepted and sat down next to David. Donna now sat on one side of David while Tanya sat on the other. That is Donna. Donna smiled bitterly, looking up at Trisha, laughing lightly, but scorned, yes. Hello, I am Donna, holding out her hand. Trisha shook her hand as Omar came over to join the group. Nice to meet you. David lifted his drink to Omar. Omar. Omar stooped down with his drink, his eyes so bloodshot red that their color was apparent even in the dimly lit club. He lisped to Trisha. Hey. He seemed very drunk. David grinned to him. Why are you here? Omar tripped back a bit. Well, hey, to party. David frowned, yeah, turning to Tanya, hey, baby, giving her a squeeze and kissing her on the cheek. Tanya still was not buying it. She pulled away some from David's advances. Noticing Kevin. Omar, your boy is over there. Omar fell into the bench. Who? I don't know, over there, Tanya pointing, there, Kevin I think. Omar looked over through the crowd, not quite seeing what she was seeing. Page 42. Where? Tanya pointed again. There, fool. Man, you must have been a crack baby. Omar smiled, grinning, standing up sloppily, peering over the crowd. Oh. Yeah, I see. David reached over Tanya, grabbing Omar's shirt. Sit down. Omar now getting angry. I am going to beat that mother dash. David moved over, crowding Tanya in the process, grabbing Omar's collar and forcing him into the bench. Sit down. Omar drinking again, leaning back, half asleep, Tanya now angry herself. Get out, Donna, Donna letting Tanya out of the booth, I am out of here, don't worry. Tanya. Walking away, disappearing in the crowd of pressed flesh. Trisha quickly excused herself, moved through the crowd and then worked her way over to Joseph and Kevin. Joe and Kevin stood up ready to make a hasty exit. Trisha grabbed Joe. Joe, you got to go. Joe looking stressed. I know that, Trisha. All three of them quickly left the club and got into Joseph's Buick. Joseph turned the key. Okay, people, let's get the hell out of here. Back in the club, Omar finally managed to pull himself away from David. What the fuck, David? David gave Omar the finger. Listen boy, you're my bitch and you know it. Sit down and calm down before I get to you later. Omar stumbled up from the bench and swigged down the rest of his drink, turning. Page 43. To David, staggering a bit. Listen, without me you got shit. David stood up, pulling on his black jacket, grabbing Omar. I am going to kill you. Donna quickly grasping at David. No, baby. Please. David pushed Donna back, Omar punching David in the face, missing his jaw. Instead sinking his knuckles into his right cheek, teeth, and bone. David staggered back. For a second seizing Omar's neck, the crowd scattering a bit, but not much around them. While Omar struggled, David took his heavy right fist hitting Omar directly in his jaw, the force of impact cracking teeth, sending Omar back and down to the floor. Donna grabbed David again. Let it go, David, please. Tanya hearing the commotion rushing through the club to them, shaking David. What are you doing, David? David wiping a bit of blood from his lip. Don't you ever fucking touch me again. Omar staggered up, spitting teeth and blood, wiping his face with his sleeve. I got your back. I got it, okay, David. Omar spitting on the dance floor, my bad slowly. Stumbling away, disappearing through the crowd, out of the club, into his car and driving away into the night. Joseph and Danny were home watching television, while Mama Cruse was in her back bedroom resting. Joe was clicking through the channels until he found a baseball game. Danny pointed. Jojo, wait, it's the Red Sox. Page 44. Joe nodded, sipping a cup of hot coffee. It seemed funny to others sometimes, such as when they got a visitor, why they usually had a pot of coffee on in the middle of the day. Joe smiled a bit. It seemed to him that was one of the few things they all shared. They were their own happy coffee clutch, at times. Yeah, okay, we will watch it. The Yanks aren't on anyway. Danny was lying on the couch drinking coffee and munching on donuts. Sounds good, Jojo. Joe looked out one of the big plastic windows of the old trailer. His mind began to wander. He thought about his past, how he had so little. He wondered how his grandparents wrecked his parents' future and then Danny's and his. It seemed to him that way too much was passed down from generation to generation. I did my best, he thought to himself. I don't know if it is enough, but I did my best. Joseph wanted more, but all he had, it seemed, was an empire of dust. Joe picked at the arm of the chair. Maybe that was one of the major problems surrounding his life, that it all seemed this or that, sand or mirrors, but what was actual and real he was not quite sure. Joseph remembered how, when Danny was much younger, they used to play outside their old apartment, which was next to the highway. Back then, it was almost as if anything was possible, if your imagination could think it. It became real, a new world to play in and be the master. Now, Joe did not want to be the master of anything. He did not want to be king, just an average guy with an average life, which was way more than he had now. Maybe, Joe thought. Seeing is believing, and why couldn't seeing be just as real as the fantasy worlds they created years ago? Those worlds were created by the strength of the imagination, and maybe, likewise, he could do the same in the real world. How much effort do we give to fantasy? Why couldn't that same amount of effort be put to reality? That thought gave him hope, and he in turn grabbed it for a moment, not wanting to let it go. Maybe God would not let him go. He did not want to fall. Page 45. Then someone came to the door of the trailer. Hollow metallic knocks were heard from the outside in. Joseph peered around the trailer's white curtains to barely see the silhouette of a woman. Danny stopped eating donuts for a minute and looked up. Joe, someone is at the door. The return to his sugar fest. Joe dismissing Danny sarcastic, I know Danny, thanks, getting up and opening the door. There standing in front of him was the woman they had met a few weeks earlier at Cruse Tavern. He wondered. Hello, Donna, how did you find us? Danny looked up from his box of donuts and waved gleefully at her from the couch. Hi Donna, hi. Donna waved at Danny with a big smile. Hi, Danny Bear. Danny giggled a bit to himself, blushing a bit and then burying his face in his coffee. Joseph gave her a suspicious look. What do you want? Donna went to take a step further in and succeeded in doing so. Well, I wanted to see if your brother wanted to go out sometime. Danny looked up again and nodded, speaking out quite loudly. Sure do, Donna. Sure do. What you think, Jojo? I sure would. Mama Cruse could be heard from the back bedroom, yelling from her bed. Who is at the door? Joe yelled back to Mama Cruse, no one mama, then to Donna, look, I don't know how you found us, but I was supposed to call you and forgot. But now we have our page 46. Hands full. I am going off to college in just a week or so, and Danny is going to be busy. Donna gave a crooked smile, brushing her hair back. Well, I know. I found you guys by asking the bartender at Cruse your last names and if you might be listed in the phone book. He said most likely. Then I happened to find your address in the phone book. And here I am. Joe thought it very odd that a woman as attractive as Donna would want to hook up with someone such as Danny. It wasn't that Danny was a bad man, it is just that he was a bit slow, too innocent, and too naive for most women. Danny did date once in a while. But the most successful dates were always with women who were similar to him. The more similar the better the dates went. Joe felt a cold chill down his back. She was a very attractive woman. He though at another time he would have liked to be in a relationship with Donna, but her going after Danny was just somewhat unusual. Joe felt the protective, father-like part of his personality come out for his brother directed toward Donna. Look. He is celibate. Danny has no sex drive. Donna looked toward Danny, now confused. Huh? Joe hesitated, looking back at his brother. Right, Danny. Danny looked up from admiring the last donut in the box. What's celibate, Joe? Joe. Donna poked a finger at Joseph. See. Joe began pushing Donna out the door. He lost them in a car accident. Donna rubbed her head, confused. What? Joe completed, moving her out onto the porch. Terrible, we mourned for months. Page 47. Danny yelled out the door. Bye, Donna. Donna yelled back to him as the door closed on her. Bye, Danny Bear. Joe locked the door behind him, turned around to Danny and leaned back. Don't say a word, Danny, not one word. Danny nodded. Okay, Jojo. Mama Cruse again yelled from the back bedroom. I want my lunch, Jojo. Joseph bit his finger. Yes, Ma, coming. Chapter 4. Omar was driving around out in his old-style Saab, windows open with Susan in the passenger seat. They were both riding aimlessly about in the cool late evening summer air. Omar was thinking where to take Susan and a bit about his troubles. Susan pulled a crumpled pack of cigarettes out of her pocket, disgusted at only finding one cigarette left. Susan looked at Omar frowning, placing the cigarette in her mouth and lighting it. She took a deep inhale and put the lighter back in her pocket. She blew the smoke into Omar's face. Omar accidentally swallowed the smoke, coughing, waving his hand over his face and grimacing at her. Woman, what is up with you lately? You on the rag? Susan gave a sad angry laugh. No, ass. You need to pay David and get a real job. Not dope slinging. Omar glanced again at her while trying to keep his eyes on the road, a car passing. Page 48. Buy them. Listen, you know I am going to make it big, real big, and I don't need your bright ideas. Susan took a puff and this time blew it out the open passenger side window. You need to get real and not take any more shit from David. You get out while you can. Omar angry, listen. Omar being quickly cut off by Susan. No, you listen. Omar pushed on the accelerator, the car hitting 70 through the back roads. I don't want to fight no more, Susan. Susan flicked the remains of her cigarette out the window. Omar, you owe him 20 grand now? What do you think he is going to do to you? He is going to cut your nuts off and you just keep on gambling and spending and drinking. Omar, distracted by his anger, nearly hitting a passing car, that's it, pulling his car off to the side of the road. I do what I want to do, and getting out, you don't tell me what to do. Susan, now speechless, watched him as he slammed the driver's side door behind him and began to walk down the road. Enraged, Susan got out her side of the car, screaming at him. Omar. Danny looked around the old trailer for something to eat. He checked the cabinets, each one with various objects, dishes, glasses, some oil, flour, a bit of sugar. Danny sighed, closing the cabinets, and then sat down to watch some television. He was lonely for his brother already. Meanwhile, Mama Cruse was sleeping soundly in the back bedroom. She wasn't doing so well since the operation. Danny did not want to think of page 49. That though, instead he thought of food. He was hungry, and after debating eating some of the sugar in the cabinet, he decided to check his pockets for some money. Danny dug in his pockets and found a few crumpled bills. They lived close enough to Cruse Tavern that he could walk it if he wanted to, so he decided to go over and get something to eat. Danny sat down at the bar. Mike, seeing Danny come in, immediately smiled, rubbed his beard as Danny came over. Well, Danny boy, how have you been? Danny clutching his money forlornly. Okay. Mike, noticing Danny's tone. You don't sound so good, why so sad? Where is your brother? Danny shook his head. Jojo, he went to school. He will be gone a long time. Mike comforting, patting Danny on his wide shoulder. Well, Danny, you're a grown man. You can take it, and if you need anything you just come over here and ask me. I will set you on the right path. Danny nodded. Thank you. Mike gave a warm smile. How is your mom? Danny shrugged, a bit unsure. I guess okay, I think. Maybe, not so good. Mike, holding a dish towel, leaned over the bar to Danny. Look, we all go through things, Dan. That is what makes us stronger. When you come out through the fire, you're better off than before. Just pray and keep holding on, and you will become the person you want to be. But, Dan, you can't run, you have to be an adult, because if you run, the problems follow you. Am I clear, Dan? Page 50. Danny nodded. Yup, Mike. Mike picked up his voice. Now, enough of this old man preaching stuff. What do you want? A drink, something to eat? Danny placed the crumpled bills he had on the bar. I got this, and what can I get to eat with it? Mike unfolded the bills. Well, you got enough for a burger and fries. But, I tell you what, I will tell the back to make what you want on the house. Danny thought about it. A cheeseburger, fries, onion rings and a soda. Mike smiling. Okay, Dan, you got it? Danny sat there fiddling with a beer coaster. He listened to the cars passing down the street and then found his focus drifting toward the television. He looked up and noticed that a baseball game was on. He watched it for a few minutes and then, remembering that his brother was not there, turned his head away. As he turned his head, he found Donna sitting at a booth in the corner of the bar. She met Danny's eyes, smiled, and waved him over. Danny nodded and went over to her, holding his hand out. Hello, Donna, good to see you, good to see you. Donna shook his hand, her small hand swallowed by his meaty palm. Donna pulled her hand back and patted the seat next to her. Have a seat, Danny. Danny nodded and sat down next to her. She moved over closer and Danny, a bit uncomfortable by her closeness, but still attracted to her, gulped out. You're pretty. Page 51. Donna nodded, brushing her hair back over her shoulder. Thank you, Danny. You're a handsome man yourself. Danny giggled a bit, looking into her eyes. Oh, Donna, thank you. Donna smiled, sipping her drink through a small straw. She then looked up at him. Where is your brother? Danny looked over to the television, now far off in the corner. He is gone. Mike came back out to peer over at Danny and Donna, a bit surprised and a bit concerned. However, he decided to talk to Danny when he could get him alone. Michael relegated his concern to the background and kept a fatherly eye on Danny while he washed a few glasses. Donna put her drink down. Gone. Danny poked at the table. He has gone to school. I miss him already. Donna, seeing how sad he was, placed her hand on his thigh. It's okay, Danny. Now even closer, looking up again and into his eyes. I am still your friend. Danny wiped a tear away. Okay, Donna, I like that. Mike, frowning, went back into the kitchen, came out with Danny's meal and brought it over to them, breaking up the closeness between Donna and Danny. He placed the dish down in front of Danny. Donna backed away a bit and smiled at Mike. Wow. Look at that, Danny. Mike placed the soda. Here you go, Danny. Danny, looking up at Michael, gave a big smile. This looks good. It will go in my tummy, thank you, Mike. Page 52. Mike smiled, sure thing, Danny, anytime. Then, as Danny picked up his burger, taking a big messy bite, looking sternly at Donna, I see you have found a new friend. Danny, speaking through a mouthful of burger, yup, crumbs falling out of his mouth and onto his plate. Donna nodded and patted Danny on the shoulder. Yes, he is a very good guy. Michael rubbed his beard. Yes, yes he is. He should stay that way. Joe slung his backpack down on a chair next to Trisha, who was lounging in one of the campus hall chairs. Students were busy coming and going, here and there. Some had a Bit of the lost look that usually occurs during the first few weeks of school. Trisha looked up, taking the headphones out of her ears. "Hello, there stranger." As she got up, hugged him and gave him a kiss. "How are you getting by?" Joe hugged her again. "Okay, I got everything situated just so in my dorm room. The guy that shares the room with me seems okay too." Trisha motioned for them to sit down. "So, have you called your brother?" Smiling warmly, "Is the trailer still in one piece?" Joe shrugged, still uneasy about leaving Danny in charge. "Well, so far, I think. Danny is taking it okay. I mean, it would have been easier to leave them if Mama did not have that big operation just a few weeks ago." Trisha took her music player, shut it down, wrapped the headphones around it and put it in her pocket. "Well, Joseph, you have to live your life. You can't exist just to help others, even your family has to fight for itself once in a while." Page 53. "I know." Joe rubbing his pants with the palms of his hands, "but, they are they're always in a crisis, they can't seem to get shit done. It is not just the immediate family, but the whole thing is off the vine on this one." Trisha broke in, looking right into his eyes, reaching over and rubbing his leg. It was comforting to Joe. "How is your mom? I should not have to be a parent to parents for the rest of my life. I am sick of this shit." Trisha grabbed Joseph's hand, her hands were soft and warm. "I know, Joe. That is what makes you a good man, though. You would not be you without all the suffering you and your family have gone through. That is why I love you." Joe rubbed her hair. "I love you too, Trish. She is doing okay. The doctor does not know if the cancer will come back, or if the fact they took the kidney will hurt her ability to deal with the psychotropics she is on. She is on lithium and a few others, and everything has to change when you lose a kidney." He looked her in the eyes, adding, "That's if she takes them, you know." Omar and one of his friends were playing video games in front of his big screen TV, while Susan sat in the background, on a love seat next to them both. Omar had set his apartment up good, but lately, to Susan's dismay, he had begun to sell some of his equipment. She thought it might have been more than just his gambling debt, maybe he had been using way too much. She yelled at him. "Omar, why don't you listen? When are we going out?" Omar caught a catch and ran for a touchdown. "Oh, yeah, take that, Jamal," he yelled cheerfully as he poked at his friend. Page 54. Jamal looked at him and grabbed the half-empty bottle of vodka from the coffee table, taking a deep drink. "You're a fool. I was on Zone D." Susan yelled at him again. "Omar." Omar grabbed the bottle out of Jamal's hands, drinking. What do you want, woman?" She kicked the coffee table. "I want what you promised, that we were going out. All I see you doing here in your crib is playing games. I could have stayed home." Omar put the bottle down. "Maybe you should have. Maybe I should bring you back to your dump of a place." Jamal leaned back a bit, surprised to hear all this coming out of them both. "Hey, guys, come on now." Susan reached over the table and grabbed the bottle. "All you have been doing is drinking, smoking your get on, and whatever fucking twigs you get your hands on, that crap ass Nixon you cut up, and then she lost it." Susan jumped over the coffee table and grabbed Omar by the neck. Omar dropped the bottle and pushed her off. "You're crazy." Jamal, seeing this, dropped the video game controller and went for the door. I will see you guys later, bye," making a quick retreat, closing the door of Omar's apartment behind him. Susan jumped on him again, hitting him. "I hate you. You're going to kill yourself. And me too. Omar grabbed her hands, listen, bitch, pushed her off and slapped her, I am. Page 55. Done with you. She staggered back on the carpet, wiping a bit of blood from her lip. I never should have meet up with you, you're nothing but trash. Omar got up, sat up in one of his chairs and held his head in his hands. He began to cry. He felt lost, as if he was a little boy and he felt he had ruined his life. He had dreams when he was a kid, now they were gone. Omar felt a wave of pain moving through his body, up from underneath his heart. It turned from almost a kind of cool blue to white as it washed up into his head. The pain was intense. He had a choice. He saw the road before him split into two, each heading down a separate path. The wave lapped the back of his mind and traveled forward into his temples. It changed from a warm white to hot red and then faded to black. He rubbed his temples and still crying he gave her a bloodshot stare. Susan, what do you want me to do? Susan was so very blunt about the whole matter. We need to get into David's crib. Joseph sipped his beer, in the dim light of a 40-watt bulb in the corner of his dorm room. His roommate left him alone so that he could be alone with Trisha. Trisha sipped her beer. Music was pumping through a small stereo on one of his shelves. They were sitting on his narrow bed. He reached out and began to kiss her on the lips. She held his jaw as he kissed her, wrapping his arms around her. Trisha's breath began to warm and Joe's palms began to sweat. He reached under her shirt and wrapped his arms around her waist. She grabbed the back of his hair and began to pull. Joe smiled. Honey, Trisha. Responding to him by kissing him on his neck. Joe turned and worked the buttons down her shirt while he started to kiss her neck and then the middle of her chest. She moaned. Page 56. Quietly as she pulled his shirt off him, Joseph unsnapped her bra and leaned her down on his bed. They began to move and turn as one. He made his way down to her navel as she arched her back, grabbing his and pulling him up again for her lips to meet his. Joe kissed her behind the ear, her neck, and then went down again. In the corner of his mind he heard his cell phone ring. He tried to ignore it, but it was real. He paused for a moment, Trisha. Frowning as he again met his lips with hers, but the phone kept ringing. He lifted himself up slightly over her. Wait, it will stop, give it a moment. Trisha kissed his shoulder, I know honey, no problem. The phone did stop ringing. Joe smiled, pulling the back of her hair, Trisha. Arching her neck to him as he kissed it, her shoulder and her breast. She felt the small of his back and his broad shoulder blades. He could smell her sweet perfume, she could smell his sweat, but the phone began to ring again. This time though Joseph sat completely up, putting his head into his hands and then angrily flicking his arms, palms open wide. Holy crap, I can't take this. Trisha sat up. Well, there is always tomorrow. With the phone still ringing, Joe looking at her sarcastically, no, because my dopey roommate has to study and his girl might want to come over, which means I am over at the library then. Trisha pointed to the cell phone next to the stereo. You should answer it. Joe moaned exasperated, got up and picked up the phone. Hello, he said a bit upset as he opened the phone, only to have whoever it was just then hang up. What a pain in the ass. Trisha clipped her bra back on. They hung up. Who was it? Page 57. Joe held out the phone to view the number. Looks like my mom beginning to dial the trailer phone. Let's see what pesky wants. Mama Cruse answered the phone. Hello? Who is this? Who do you think? Joe said, shaking his head and then sitting down next to Trisha. Mama Cruse sitting up in her bed. Oh, I don't know. It is your son. What do you want? Danny, your brother is gone, Jojo. Joseph leaned back, his head hitting the dorm wall, rubbing it. What do you mean? He is gone. He's been going out on and off and staying out long. Mommy needs him. You no. Joe looked wide-eyed at Trisha, who giggled a bit, reaching out and rubbing his head after he had finished. Well, he can't drive, Ma, so he has to be walking. Did he say where he was going all this time? Mama Cruse looked out one of trailer windows. He said he had a girlfriend. A car pulls up and he just goes. Mama needs you, I don't feel good, you know. Joe held the phone so that Mama could not hear him say to Trisha. Trisha, we got a big problem here. Then Joe holding the phone back to his ear. Okay Mama, I will deal with it. Omar drove quietly with the car's headlights out, up to David's apartment. Susan, page 58, was next to him, holding a bag and a crowbar. He spoke quietly in the dark of the night to Susan, who was rubbing her neck. She was sweating and breathing heavily. Hey. Remember, when I get out, you get in the seat. If you see David or the popos, you beep the horn quick a couple of times. Susan looked at him, her eyes bright, scared but full of adrenaline. You know where I told you he keeps his roll? Yeah. Good. Omar pointed to her window as he turned off the car. Roll your window down a bit so you can hear anything going on out there, as he did the same on his side of the car. He reached out. Give me the stuff. She handed it to him. Here, as he crept out of the car, quietly closing the door behind him. She slid over to the driver's side seat, grabbing the keys and holding onto them, which were still in the ignition, ready to turn them in an instant. He looked back at her and paused. Go. Susan whispered, urging him on. He nodded and ran to David's door. It was a wooden door, which was good for Omar, but the door had a deadbolt and a regular door lock. For some reason Omar did not expect that while planning the break-in. He propped the crowbar in the door between the doorknob and the deadbolt, looked quickly around him and with all his strength pushed on it. The door gave, popping the door handle partially off, but the deadbolt still partly held. Now sweating profusely, he gave one more push and this time the door opened completely. He pushed the door open with his forearm and closed the door behind him with his boot. He ran upstairs, flicking a light with his sleeve. He looked around, at first seeing a couch and a big TV. Omar then ran into the bedroom, a large bed, and a dresser. Then he found the closet. Omar opened the door of page 59. The closet and found a lockbox under some clothes strewn on the closet floor. He cursed to himself. Susan did not say what type of lockbox it was. Omar was expecting some tin junk box, not a big industrial one. He propped it between his boots and jammed the bar partially into it. Omar pushed and the bar twisted out of his hands. He placed the box back between his boots and pushed the bar back into the box. Just then he heard the car horn, 3 short beeps. He picked up the box, shit, and ran down the steps, falling down the last couple. Omar hit the door with his shoulder. Fuck. Damn you, Susan. He pulled the apartment door open and ran to the car. She moved over. Get in, fool. He fell into the car and gave her the box. Here. She looked at it amazed. What the hell you give me the box for? Omar turned on the car. Who's around? Pulling the car out of park as a man in a wheelchair was yelling halfway down the street. Susan yelling at him, "It's that old goat in the wheelchair." Omar raced away in his car, passing Paco who was shaking his fists angrily at them and yelling loudly, "You pendejo! You cabron!" Omar swerved down the street. "What did you beep the horn for?" She angrily pushed him, "Because he saw me." "So, it's Paco." "Yeah, well," Susan looked around, "where is the crowbar?" Omar quickly looked about the vehicle, passing a car on the way and entering the highway. "I must have forgotten it, damn." Page 60. Susan rolled her eyes, stomped her shoes on the car floor and pushed him again. "You're a complete ass, Omar. I told you do it right. You gave me the damn box too. What the hell am I going to do with this damn box? We will open it when we get to my place." Omar placed the lockbox on his coffee table. They sat down exhausted. After a few minutes, Susan looked at him. "Are you going to open it?" Omar took a deep breath. "What am I supposed to open it with, Genus? I don't have the crowbar." Susan thought for a moment, "How about a butter knife?" Omar looked at the box, then at Susan and then at the box again. "You're kidding. Right? You have been drinking too much, woman." Susan got up to go into the kitchen. "I have not." After a half an hour Omar finally got the box open with a butter knife and a hammer. They looked into the box as Omar dropped the butter knife disgustedly. Exhausted. In the box, he saw money and a pistol, looked like a .45. Omar took the money out, quickly counting it. "It looks like 20 grand. Susan grabbed the money. "Let me see." Omar took the gun out, releasing the clip into his hand, loaded too then. Snapped the clip back in. "I may need this." Chapter 5. Page 61. The professor was writing equations on the chalkboard as Joe looked up and then copied them down on his notepad. It was only the first few weeks of school, but to Joe he seemed to be getting along okay. Joseph wanted a better life, not what his mother had, not what his father had, not what the past held. He wanted to let go of them, not because he did not love them, but because he could not save them forever. Michael the bartender once told him that you could not save a drowning man if you yourself cannot swim, and you cannot save a drowning man who does not want to be saved because he will take you down with him. What could Joseph do for the people that wouldn't solve their own issues? It was not just theirs but the weight of their forefathers. The family had at one time been upper middle class. In fact, you could say they were quite well off, but that was several generations ago, in the 1920s. Unfortunately, through years of abuse, neglect and selfishness, each new generation fell further into chaos. Joe was determined to break the chains of iniquity. He would break them, even if he had to go halfway around the world and move mountains to do so. Joe had chosen a seat next to the classroom's windows and he took a minute to look out and open one next to him. He could smell the almost autumn-like air. The sun was bright against the shrubs, trees, and flowers. Joseph would start now. And if it took more extreme measures to break the back of the chaos that surrounded his family, his life, well then he would do it, one step at a time. For now Joe felt, he had to take it slow, because one false step and he could fall into the trap that had enslaved many of his family before. Joseph's mind drifted to his father. Perhaps it was because he thought of Michael, the bartender, before, perhaps because the math professor was an older guy. He thought about the last vague recollections of him, when he was just a child, a boy in the city. Page 62. How could someone just destroy a family, a wife? How could you just sit your life out? Gambling at the city tracks, the dirty, filth-stained betting parlors while your children went hungry in a small town in the middle of nowhere? Joe thought to himself. You were a fool, Dad. You rejected your sons, two grown men with talents and dreams and love to give you. You missed it all for a few tokens and a few bagels at some shitty city deli. Now you are gone and you missed it all, your blood. You missed it all. Joe looked back at the professor and began to write again. His father traded his soul for a handful of copper coins. Joseph finally became absorbed in the then and there as his phone began to vibrate with an incoming phone call. He thought better than to pull it out of his shirt pocket, but he did anyway. Joe looked at the number. It did not look familiar, but the number looked like it could be the hospital. Joseph leaned down in his seat, quietly answering the phone. Hello. A young woman somberly asked him over the phone. Are you Joseph Cruse? I am in class now, I am. The professor pointed to him to hang up the phone. Joe pointed to the phone and motioned that it was serious, and the professor allowed him to excuse himself to the hallway. Joseph did so, quietly stepping out of the class and into the hallway. He walked down the hall a bit. What is going on? Your mother has instructed us to inform you she has been admitted and is doing okay. Joe held his head. What is wrong? Why is she there? She is going through acute kidney failure, so we need to see you. She has also been off several of her medicines. The doctor would like to see you if possible. Page 63. Joe slumped down on his haunches, his back to the wall. Where is my brother? Your mother said she did not know where he was. He went to his knees. David pulled up near his apartment, seeing the door broken and half open. Disgusted, he found a parking spot and slammed the car door behind him angrily. He was quite angry. Who broke into my apartment? David thought to himself. I am going to kill the fool who did this to me. Tanya got out the passenger side and ran up to him. David walked briskly. I am going to break the legs of the fool who did this. Tanya grabbed his shoulder. Wait, calm down and find out who it was first. You got a few enemies, so find out first. David grabbed the doorknob to his place and it fell off into his hand. Shit. Tanya looked at him. Ain't nobody called the cops either. David gave her a cold stare. Why would they? Just then, he heard the ragged howl of an old man down the street wheeling to him. It was Paco. He was waving at them with one hand and steering his chair with the other. Paco yelled to them. Hey, peddler. Dealer. David walked up to him, meeting Paco halfway up the street. You know who did that? Pointing down the street. Paco nodded, brushing his now sweaty, straggly white hair from his face. Your juggler did that. David laughed with Tanya now at his side again. Old man, I got a lot of rats. Page 64. You don't help me much. Paco nodded, holding out his hand. You got a cigarette? I tell you, more for a smoke. David looked to Tanya, who then fished in her pocket for a crumpled half a pack. Here, she said, giving it to him. Paco looked at it, half pack, then looking up to them both, he came with his girl last night. You must have been with your girl, huh? He took your box, left in a hurry. David, now quite enraged, grabbing the armrest of Paco's chair. Who? Tell me. Before I push you off a bridge. Paco held out his palms, looking up smiling. Easy, my friend, I tell you the whole thing, but I have no matches to smoke with. David looked over to Tanya again. Give him your lighter. Tanya growled at him. What? Do it? She fished for her lighter, tossing it to the old man. He caught it and smiled. Gracias, looked like Omar to me. David gritted his teeth. Okay. Joseph rushed into the hospital, running up to the front desk. I would like to know what room Betty Cruse is in. Page 65. The patient representative scanned the computer. You are. I am her son, Joseph Cruse. She looked down at the computer and then up at him. She is on this floor. Oncology wing south room 137, taking a blank ticket, writing the room down and visitor, then handing it to him, and here, clip this on your shirt. Joseph took it and clipped it on his shirt. Thank you. She pointed down the hall. Go through that door there and down the hall, take your first left. Joe nodded and rushed through the door, down the hall and took the first left. Another set of double doors opened and he went onto the ward. He looked at the hospital room numbers, finding his mother's. He peered in. She was on the near side of the double room, resting with her eyes closed. A doctor stepped up next to him from behind. Are you the son of Miss Cruse? Joe turned around. Yes. He looked at him. I am Dr. Feingold and Dr. Thovan will be here in about an hour. If you want to wait, it would be most beneficial. He needs to talk to you about your mom's cancer. Your mom's health is very serious. I am assigned to your mom as well. We ran blood work and her lithium levels are leveling off, but her kidney is not functioning well. Joe nodded. Has my brother been here to visit her? I cannot say, I don't think so. Has your mom taken her medicine lately? Joe shrugged, looking in. It is hard to say. She usually takes her medicine for a page 66. While and then just stops until she gets psychotic and then we have to go and hospitalize her to get her to take them again. It's important for us to know, because she came in with very high levels of lithium in her blood, and if she had stopped taking her medicine several days before, it would give us an indication of how severe her situation really is. She has blood in her urine as well as an elevated white blood count. She came in with jaundice and dehydrated. It seems she has not eaten well for several days. Have you been watching her? Joe, now a bit defensive. Well, I was at school, my brother was supposed to take care of her in my absence. The doctor nodded thoughtfully. I see. Omar was on a roll. He was hitting the pool table hard at another bar in the town of Greenberg. He and David had several bars and clubs that they frequented. Hey, I am going to win this one hands down, baby, he said cheerfully, hiding the burn in his stomach, the pain in his chest, giving Susan a big hug. She pushed him away. Fool, let's go. Omar pushed back. I am on a roll. I will win it all, baby, he cheered, poking her with the butt of the cue stick. Susan pushed him away. Samos pulled a pick out of his back pocket, picking his graying hair. He sipped a beer as he waited for Omar to pick a shot. Samos was one of the best pool players in the area. He worked hard at his game. Samos' lanky height gave him a bit of an advantage over his opponents, and he took it. He rarely played local, but this time he was in the page 67 neighborhood. What's it going to be? Omar pointed, corner pocket, and carefully took his shot. The ball slammed into the pocket hard, hopping in, and next, over side pocket, Omar said, smiling, hitting the ball hard again, with a snap and clack, the billiard clipping the bumper and spiraling out. Shit. Samos grinned, picked his hair again quickly and then deposited the pick into his back pocket. He took his stick, walked about the table, and a good shot caught his eyes. Combo, 210 side corner pocket, Samos said, pointing with his stick. He quickly chalked up and shot. The 10 neatly fell into the side pocket. The cue ball then returned to a convenient position on the table. He pointed 2 into the side pocket, and then cracked the ball. Susan grabbed Omar at the collar of his shirt, whispering not too softly in his ear, "Get out of this game alive." Omar watched as Samos sank the 2 into the side pocket. "I will." Susan pleaded with him. "No, you don't understand. You never do. You have $1,000 on that table." Samos looked over to Omar and Susan, 8 ball, turning to the table pointing with his cue stick, corner pocket, and hit the ball in. "Game over." Omar pleaded. "Wait." Samos went to take the 2 grand from the table. Omar quickly reached for the money, his hand covering it before Samos could get to pile of cash. Samos gave him a questioning look. "Yeah, Omar. Listen. Page 68. Samos leaned over him. "Get your hands of my money." Omar shrank his hand back. "Let's play again." Samos looked at a few people who were over in his corner drinking, smiling at them and then questioning Omar, "Do you have money to put up?" "No." Samos took the 2 grand and folded it, ready to put it into his back pocket. "Then you're done." Omar shook his head. The pain in his chest became fear. "No, no," he whispered. He had lost the whole amount he stole from David. "No." He pulled his pistol out from his pants and pointed it at Samos. "Gimme the money." Samos gave him a fierce look. Enraged, he yelled, "What?" The people in the bar moving back a bit, whispering, some leaving out the front and back door. Samos turned his fists and with power backhanded Omar with a long-armed reach. Omar fell back from the powerful blow, twisting his face as he hit the floor, the pistol kicking out of his hand as it hit the floor hard. The pistol bounced and slid over near Samos. Susan rushing over, Omar grabbing Samos, Samos pushing her down. Samos picked up the pistol, grabbed Omar by the neck and pulled him up. "You point a fucking gun at me." With Omar's neck in one hand, the pistol in the other, Samos again leaned over Omar, this time pulling him over the pool table. He pointed the barrel of the gun right to his forehead. Susan got up, standing, pleading next to Samos, "Please. Don't kill him." Samos laughed at her and then growled at Omar, "What do you say?" Page 69. Omar sweating, crying, "Please, please." Samos cocked the gun. "Next time I will put a bullet in your head." He backhanded Omar again, who fell over crumpled onto the floor, under the pool table this time. Samos grabbed the money, now on the floor with Omar, took the clip out of the gun, cleared the chamber and tossed the gun onto the table. He smiled to the bartender. And then Susan, who was crying next to Omar wiping the blood from his mouth. Samos took the clip with him outside and threw it into the parking lot. Samos walked down the street laughing. Some people never learn, he thought. Some people never learn. Joseph put his key into the trailer doorknob and turned it. He felt the door unlock. He turned the doorknob and entered his home. It seemed a bit alien to him. Joe hoped he would find Danny there. He peered about, hello, but there was no answer. A small chill ran up his spine. Joe closed the door behind him, looking about. The place seemed a bit disheveled. There were a few blankets on the couch, some dirty dishes in the sink, and one of the upper cabinets was open. He went over to peer in the sink, which on inspection looked quite disgusting, and then looked into the open cabinet. There was a jar of peanut butter with the top off. Joe found the lid, spun it on and put it back, quietly closing the cabinet door. Joseph then made his way to the back of the trailer. Danny's bed was not made, some of his clothes on the floor next to a nightstand. Joe frowned in heartache and moved to his bed. He saw it made neatly. Finally, he moved to the back bedroom. This was his mother's bedroom. He found it disheveled. The sheets were strewn, a pillow next to the back door. Both his mother's dressers were open as well. Joseph looked into them. Some clothes must have been hurriedly taken when the ambulance was called. Joe sat on the bed quietly, putting his head in his hands. He sat there for a minute or two, became sleepy, fell back and passed out. Page 70. Trisha's cell phone began to ring. She looked at the number, it was Tanya's. Trisha was in the campus library, at one of the computer terminals. The phone rang loud, causing eyebrows to rise. Unfortunately, because of this she was forced to answer it. "Hello," Trisha whispered as she quickly logged off the computer, grabbing her book bag and getting ready to leave the library. Of course, it was Tanya, but she answered as such. "Anyway, it's Tanya, you got a minute? It is really, really important." Trisha shrugged, "I guess, hold on a minute," and then after quickly leaving the building, "I was in the library. What is going on?" Tanya could hear passing cars in the background, David driving up to a gas station. "I got only a second here." Trisha leaned up against the wall of the library. She was now getting a bit concerned. What is it?" "Listen, David is going to go after Omar. Omar, I think, is going to go after Kevin. I called you because your boyfriend is tied with Kevin. Get him out of town." Trisha could hear the door of the car open as David got in. "Who you on the phone with?" Then Tanya telling David, "Just some wrong number," the phone then going dead. Trisha looked at the phone's screen. The phone now disconnected. She hung up and looked up at the sky. It was getting cloudy. It looked like rain. Joe woke up to a meaty hand shaking his shoulder. He opened his eyes briefly and then, startled, jumped up. "What?" Page 71. Danny leaped back. "Sorry, Joe. Sorry." Joseph rubbed his eyes, then smoothed his hair back angrily. "Where the hell have you been?" Danny, now near the corner, backed up to one of Mama Cruse's dressers. "Sorry, Jojo, I did not mean to scare ya." Joe slid over on Mama Cruse's bed. "Here, sit." Danny nodded agreeably and sat next to Joe. "Sorry, Jojo." Joe nodded, "Okay." It was getting dark out and drizzle again hit the roof of the trailer. He reached over to turn on a light. "Where have you been, by the way?" Danny smiled, thinking about it. "Oh, I been out with Donna." Joe suppressed some anger. "How did you get home?" "She has a real nice car and she dropped me off here." Then Danny blushed. "She gave me a kiss and we did some other stuff before too." Joe looked at the clock. It was mid-afternoon. "Listen, Danny, I told you to take care of Mama. It looks like you did not do such a good job." Danny sheepishly moved a little off Mama Cruse's bed. "I know, Jojo, but she wasn't on her pills and she yelled at me. Nothing I did was good for her." Joe nodded, understanding just how he felt. "Why didn't you call me?" "I did not want you to get mad, Joe. Mama was mad and then if you got mad, I would just cry." Then with a sad look at Joe, "She got real sick. I thought she would get better." Page 72. Joe stood up, and "Did you call the ambulance for her?" hearing his cell phone ring, which he had placed on the counter in the kitchen. "Nah, Jojo. I went out and when I came back, she was gone. Joseph shook his head a bit, went into the kitchen to grab his phone and answered. It? Hey Trisha, what's up? Danny then following Joe entered the kitchen, the rain getting heavier outside. Now. Danny listening intently, who is it, Jojo? Joe waved a hand of dismissal at Danny and into the phone. No, well we got a bit of chaos here, yeah, I got a minute. Danny seeing as he would have to wait for information, found a cabinet that contained the peanut butter, unscrewed the top and stuck his finger in. Joe seeing him from the corner of his eye pointed. Get a spoon, Danny. Danny nodded. Sure, Jojo. Then Joe's eyes widened. What? Huh? Shit. Okay, Trisha, love you, bye. Danny seeing his opportunity, what did she say, licking his fingers. Joe looked at him licking his fingers and with the patience of a saint, I thought I told you to get a spoon. Danny smiled. I know. Joe rubbed his temples for a moment. Listen, I got to get Kevin and take him someplace. I want you to go to the hospital and sit with Ma for a while, a few hours. Danny nodded, sticking a finger back in the peanut butter jar. How, you take me? Jojo. Page 73. Joe pulled out his wallet giving Danny some money. Take a cab, Ace cab. Stay a few hours, you hear me? Danny grabbed the money with sticky fingers. Okay, Ace cab service. Joe then placing his wallet back in his pocket, his cell phone and his keys, call me before you even think or attempt to leave the hospital, okay? Danny nodded again cheerfully, okay, Jojo. The rain came down now and it was beginning to get heavy. Kevin heard a rap on his front door, the steel sounding hollow. He rolled off his mattress, which was still on the floor, pushing off garbage as he got to his knees. The banging on the door continued. I hear you, Kevin yelled weakly, holding his pounding head. He could hear the rain hit his only window. He grabbed a chair to pull him up, then pushing old food cartons from the chair he sat on it, a roach securing away. He went to pass out again, but again, there was pounding at his door. He stood, I hear you. Stumbling down the steps. Kevin carefully opened the door, just a crack, finding Omar. Still half dazed in shock, Kevin attempted to close the door, but he was too slow in his weakened stupor. Omar pushed it in. I got you now, he yelled slamming the door behind him. Joseph rushed over to Kevin's apartment. Joe parked his Buick abruptly, half on the sidewalk and in the pouring rain ran up to his door. He found the door ajar. Joe opened it a crack more. Kevin, he yelled up the steps, the rain soaking his head and his shirt. Thunder began to clap outside as Joe carefully moved up Kevin's apartment steps. It was dark. Joe could see very little, except the outlines of the ruin Kevin lived in. Again. Page 74. Joseph called out, Kevin, and a weak moan was heard. Joseph found a usable light switch and flicked it. The overhead light illuminated the room, revealing garbage, a chair, blankets and a bed on the floor, but no Kevin. Still he heard a bit of movement. Joseph kneeled down near the mattress. Kevin, he said as he turned his ear to listen more closely. Finally, Joe grabbed the mattress and turned it over. There under the mattress, lay Kevin in a pool of his own blood. Joe, shocked, fell back onto the seat of his pants. He grabbed his cell phone and dialed 911.